All right, YouTube, once again, it's Kennard, Vernon Stewart here for the podcast, Talking Auburn Football. Go ahead and like the video, comment, and subscribe to Vernon Speaks Sports Auburn. And as always, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger, War Eagle. Been a real interesting week for the Tigers. One, you got some decommits. You got Armani Goodwin, one of the top commits of the 2021 recruiting class. Auburn was really banking on that particular recruit. He decommits. Auburn actually goes to the number 39 ranked recruiting class in the country, down there with the Vanderbilts and the Middle Tennessee states and some of the lower tier programs of the world. But what a lot of people don't know, there's some guys down the pipeline that could actually commit to the Tigers and build that thing back up. Now, best case scenario, I don't see a top 10 recruiting class. I see somewhere around like 11 or 12, kind of like in 2019 recruiting class with Bo Nix, where they had a couple of guys that dropped off. I think that's what we're looking at, best case scenario. But we got to look at also the fact that, Auburn did not have the Big Cat weekend. Auburn did not have the supplementary contact with players. But if you look across the country, there are a lot of guys decommitting from schools that Auburn could actually capitalize on. But the biggest thing is about Gus Malzahn as the head coach at Auburn. Is he the guy? Is he the guy that's going to lead Auburn to something? Because if you look at all the coaches in the SEC outside of Nick Saban, Kirby Smart has access to some of the best athletes in the country. He hasn't been able to get it done. One appearance in the national champ. So we'll go to this. Kirby Smart, for example, kind of similar. And this is for all you sunshine pumping guys out there that talk about the sunshine pumping stuff. I'm still not a big fan of that. But let's just talk about this. Kirby Smart comes to Georgia, they basically roll out the red carpet for Kirby Smart from a recruiting standpoint, facility standpoint. He goes to the national championship in, I think, his second year as a head coach. Oklahoma actually should have won that game on the low, but that's a different conversation. But either way, Kirby Smart, he wins on recruiting signing day every year. Number one in the country. What does he do? He goes to the SEC championship. Let's see, what is it? 3 times, I think. And he beats Auburn. Okay, we'll give him that in 2017. But the other 2 years, he gets beat by Alabama and Georgia. And New Year's Six. So what he goes to the New Year's Six Bowl and beats Baylor, but all of a sudden he's good to go. You know what I'm saying? This year coming in 2020, Kirby Smart, best recruiter in the nation. What does he do? He gets beat down by Alabama again. And then gets shellacked by a Florida team that actually lost to Texas A&M. But Kirby Smart, I guess, is safe. I guess it's all good. Blah, blah, blah. But let's go back to Auburn. Is Gus Malzahn the guy? Gus Malzahn comes to Auburn as mostly a high school coach for the majority of his tenure as a coach. Comes to Auburn in 2009. Does okay. Comes at Auburn in 2010. Was offensive coordinator of the national championship team in 2010. Cam Newton is the quarterback. Everything is all good. Comes back to Auburn after leaving to be the head coach at Arkansas State. Led them to a Sun Belt championship and a bowl game. Comes back to Auburn. Leads Auburn to a national championship after an epic fail in 2012. Where Auburn lost 9 SEC games. winning against New Mexico State, Alabama A&M, and a great overtime win over Louisiana Monroe. Totally changes the trajectory of the program, goes to the national championship a few seconds away from winning the national championship. Auburn loses to Florida State, which ironically Jimbo Fisher is the head coach of Texas A&M now, as he was the head coach at Florida State when Auburn epically fell in the national championship game after being up 21-3. Should have won that game. But now here I ask again for all of the Auburn fan base, is Gus Malzahn the guy? Or an even better question is, can any coach take Auburn, considering everything, every entity involved? Can any coach take on what the Auburn program has to take on every year? Bullet point number 1. Auburn is in the SEC West. Auburn has to take on LSU, Georgia, Texas A&M. Now you got Leach and Lane Kiffin in the SEC West, which poses a different level of recruiting challenges and there. But at the same time, you got to face LSU, Georgia, and Alabama every year. Games that you're probably not going to be favored in. Now, of all the games involved, I would suspect that Auburn would be favored against LSU, considering all that they got going on, over Georgia and Alabama. Two solid programs, two programs that probably, at least be within the game late into the fourth quarter against any team they play. Alabama has proven that they can beat anybody in the country. If you beat Alabama, it's because of some minor miracle on the low, but that's on the low. Georgia, kind of a beatable team, I think, because they do recruit well, but I just don't think Georgia recruits well in the right spots, to be fair. George Pickens was a great recruit out of Alabama for Georgia, but he hadn't panned out. He doesn't behave well. He's not disciplined. So, again, I ask you, let's get back to the whole Gus Malzahn thing. Gus Malzahn comes to Auburn, 2013, SEC champion in 2013. Has some shaky points between 2013 and 2017. Had the epic run in 2017 where he defeated Alabama and Georgia. Both were the number 1 teams in the country. They came to Jordan-Hare. Gus Malzahn beat those guys by double digits. Herein lies the big contract that we talk about. The reason that some of the Gus Malzahn haters, you can't get rid of them now, because now you got, not only do you have this contract extension, but you got a guy that's still kind of winning a little bit. He's not winning in the way that you want him to, but he's winning. 2018, he dodged a bullet. Epic failure headed in the stretch. Lost to Mississippi State. He shouldn't have lost that game. Lost to Tennessee. Definitely shouldn't have lost that game. Ole Miss won that game because of, just had more talent than Ole Miss. Then you go to the game against Texas A&M. Auburn in the most epic failure as far as defense in the Gus Malzahn era. 450 yards, giving up a game, giving up an epic proportion of first downs defensively. Offense not performing well on their way in the biggest downslide since 2009. Auburn finds a way to beat Texas A&M. Now you're stuck with Gus because he won that game, beat Texas A&M, lost to Georgia though, lost to Alabama, beat Liberty in between that, but then you go to the Purdue game in the Music City Bowl and just straight up shellacked them. I think it was like 63-10. I think it was 63-10. 14 or whatever it was. And how do you justify firing the coach that not only has has a crazy contract, $49 million over a 7-year span. Now you got to buy that out, but he beats this team in epic proportions. Then you go to the next year, you beat Washington in 2018. No, not Washington, but in 2019, you beat Oregon with a true freshman quarterback. Hey, you got to keep Gus around. You don't want to. It doesn't make sense to the typical fan baser, but that's what you got. Then you lose to Florida on the road. Florida had a pretty good football team. I think Auburn should have won that game. Then you lose to LSU. LSU in the most miraculous run of their history, winning the national championship. Auburn only lost that game by 3 points. Then you go to Georgia. I think, when I think about the Georgia game from 2019, I honestly think Auburn really missed an opportunity. I think Auburn should have won that game. Just being real. I think Auburn should have won that game more than they should have won the Alabama game, which they actually did win. But this is for the sunshine pumpers. I don't get this whole sunshine pumping thing. It's all about results. Gus Malzahn is not the absolute worst coach in Auburn history. Yeah, he's had some challenges. He's missed out on some opportunities, as many coaches at Auburn has. But I want to ask you, is he the guy, though? Is he the guy that's going to take Auburn to the next level, to the level of competing for SEC West championships every year, competing for the SEC championship every year, and subsequently making it into the playoffs? I don't know who else has done it outside of Nick Saban, Gus Malzahn himself, Kirby Smart. Who else has done it? And who else are you going to bring in and do it? PJ Fleck, maybe. He looks great up in Minnesota. He's done a lot with less. That's cool. But I'm not, and see, here's the thing. I'm not advocating to say that Gus Malzahn is the guy, or to say that Gus Malzahn is the best choice that Auburn has. But who else do you got? Hugh Freeze, maybe. Gus Malzahn beat Hugh Freeze, actually, at home in Ole Miss. So this is something for y'all to sleep on tonight. Is Gus Malzahn the guy? Is Gus Malzahn the guy? And probably a big portion of the Auburn fan base will say absolutely not. And here's why they'll say that. One, you can't beat your rivals on the road, 0-4 against all of them. You can't beat UCF, who was, I don't know, UCF should have beat UCF, but you didn't in the Peach Bowl. You should have beat Georgia in the SEC championship game. But here's what Auburn is up against: LSU, Alabama, and Georgia every year. And name me one team other than Alabama that could beat all three of those teams in 1 year: LSU, Georgia, and let's say Florida. Let's say you got LSU, Georgia, and Florida on your schedule in 1 year. Are you going to beat them? You go 2-1 at best, 0-3 at worst, 1-2 in the median. It is what it is. Once again, it's Kennard, Vernon, and Stewart here for the podcast. Gus Malzahn is your head coach. Some people are not satisfied with that. And some people will say, well, you're complacent. I don't give a shit about being complacent, because my complacency or non-complacency is not going to change anything. Like the video, comment, and subscribe. And it's always great to be an Auburn Tiger, War Eagle.